All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushua, Bahasham Rakakudash. I want to give double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing His truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. This is your fellow servant, Rakar from the GMS Orlando camp, coming at you with another impromptu lesson. Tonight's lesson is going to be entitled, Don't Get Caught Up in Esau's Paradigm. All right, and tonight's lesson is inspired by a conversation I was overhearing earlier today at the plantation amongst a couple of Edomites. And one of them happened to mention this book called the Diaries, which I want to get into a little bit. Lord, when this is edifying unto you elect. All right, in light of these recent events that have transpired regarding the death of this guy, CK. All right, because as a result, one thing that Esau has been pushing very heavily, since these events have transpired, is this whole left-right paradigm, this whole conservative, liberal paradigm, which has gotten a lot of these people caught up. A lot of people are caught up in this paradigm that Esau has put in front of their face and really overlooking the prophecies that are at hand. So I just want to get into it a little bit, Lord, when this is edifying unto you elect. All right, and one thing that this is also doing, as Esau pushes this whole left-right paradigm, is really tearing down his kingdom from the inside out. Just like the Lord prophesied. The Lord said that He will set Egyptian against Egyptian, brother against brother in the book of Isaiah 19, and that's exactly what's happening now. Matter of fact, let's get that in Isaiah chapter 19. All right, and verse 2, it says, and I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians. All right, now America is considered to be the modern day Egypt. All right, this is spiritual Egypt. All right, so it says, and I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight everyone against his brother and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. And the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof. All right, and right now we're in the midst of this prophecy playing out. All right, these modern day Babylonians or these modern day Americans are set against each other. All right, you have the hard left, the far right, the conservative, the liberal, all right, the Democrat, the Republican. All right, Esau's kingdom is split. And like the Lord said in the book of Luke, this is Luke chapter 11 and verse 17. He said, this is Yahushua. He said, but knowing their thoughts, He said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and a house divided against a house falleth. If Satan also be divided against himself, how shall his kingdom stand? All right, and right now Satan is heavily divided against himself. All right, you have a lot of these Edomites cursing out their self. The scriptures go into, if Satan curses his own soul, man. A lot of these Edomites are set against each other. And what we're witnessing right now, all right, is the fall of an empire from the inside out. Edom, Babylon is destroying itself from the inside out before it gets destroyed externally by the thermonuclear missiles. That's a tongue twister. All right, that are going to be shot over from Russia, China, and Iran, in which, while a lot of people are caught up in this left-right paradigm, all right, the Lord is stirring up the battlefield for World War III. And He's also stirring up the prophecy of the mark of the beast, with the infrastructure being set in place right before these people's eyes while they're caught up in a lot of bullshit. And that's why us that are hopefully elect, should always keep our minds focused, all right, and continue to measure the times diligently, like the Lord said in 2nd Esdras. All right, because Esau is putting out a lot of propaganda. He's putting out a lot of bullshit for these people to focus on, so that day is going to come upon them as a thief in the night. But for us who are the household of light, the household of faith, for those that are hopefully elect, we got to keep our eyes focused on what the Lord has going on and focused on prophecy. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11. It says, lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. All right, and Satan likes to distract. Esau likes to distract. And that's why 1 Peter 5:8 tells us to be sober and vigilant, because our adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, is walking about seeking whom he may devour, seeking those who are distracted, those not paying attention. I like to use the analogy of gazelles at a watering hole. When you look at animals, when they go to the watering hole, they're always on alert, because it's crocodiles in the water. It's peril on all sides, which is essentially, where we find ourselves. It's peril on all sides. You got gators in the water, crocs in the water. You got lions roaming about. You got hippos. You got hyenas. You got to be constantly on your watch. The other gazelles, you always have a watchman. Get that noise or, get that look like, hey, we about to be out. And the lion is paying attention to the one that ain't paying attention. The one that got his head far in that water. Got his ears all the way into the water. That's Satan. That's Esau. He's looking to devour those who aren't paying attention, man. Those who are ignorant of his devices, in which we are not. But so one of the Edomites had mentioned this book, and looked it up, and which goes to show you, man, a lot of these Edomites, understand where their government is headed, and are trying to prep themselves for anarchy, in which a lot of them don't understand that they're going to get swept up in the destruction of their society as well. It's not going to go like a lot of these Edomites think. A lot of these Edomites think they're going to grab that bug out bag, grab that pistol, and they're going to fight it out to the end. They're going to come out on top like the star of The Walking Dead or some fantasy movie. When in reality, a lot of these Edomites are going to meet their fate a couple of minutes into anarchy. A couple of days in, they're going to meet their fate. But this is the Turner Diaries. It says it is a 1978 novel by William Luther Pierce, the founder and chairman of National Alliance, an American white nationalist group, published under the pseudonym Andrew MacDonald. It was serialized in the National Alliance publication Attack from 1975 to 1978 before being published in paperback form by the National Alliance in 1978. As of 2001, the book had sold an estimated 300,000 copies, initially only available through mail order from the National Alliance. In 1996, it was republished by Barricade Books with a foreword that disavowed the novel. All right, now you can read a little bit of it, but I really just typed in the chat GPT and asked it to summarize the book for us, which is really going into an Edomite nationalist, ideology. It's really the Edomite Bible, so to speak, and where they get a lot of their prophecy, so to speak. But it says the Turner Diaries 1978 is a controversial and extremist novel by William Luther Pierce. It says it's considered one of the most influential works of white supremacist literature. Here's a summary. Format. The book is written as a diary of a man named Earl Turner, a member of a violent underground movement. The U.S. government enacts strict gun control and policies favoring racial equality, which Turner and his group see as oppressive, which, a lot of these, as we read through a lot of these, you can see the parallels within today's society, and this is where a lot of these Edomites have gotten their ideologies from. A lot of your Joe Smo Edomite, a lot of their ideology comes from, this book, and you can see it as we read through these formats. It says they form the organization, a Edomite nationalist guerrilla movement that wages war against the government and minorities. The group carries out bombings, assassinations, and eventually a nuclear attack. Turner becomes a martyr for the cause, which, what do they call this guy? CK. All right. It says, and the story ends with the organization taking global control after a race-based civil war. It says themes: violent overthrow of Babylon government, Edomite supremacist ideology, and anti-small hatism. justification of T as a path to racial purity and global domination. The book has inspired real-world extremist groups and acts of T, like the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, is banned or heavily restricted in many places due to its extreme content. And if you want more, you could, go read it for yourself. I just want to grab these points, all right, because a lot of this paradigm that's being pushed, stems from these different ideologies. Over Esau, with his supremacist ideology, is trying to come up with different ways to entrap and to eliminate Jake. This is one of the ways. Excuse me. This is one of the ways, because by inciting a racial war, a civil war, it's going to give a lot of these Edomites precedent to go into the neighborhoods of you Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians and wreak havoc, which is exactly what they're stirring up now. And they've already accomplished somewhat of it with ICE, and with, the sending of these troops into these different Jake cities like Chicago, Memphis, and so on and so forth. A lot of these things are being accomplished. But at the end of the day, we understand that for the elect, these things aren't going to be able to overthrow them, ultimately. And at the end of the day, this was prophecy. The Lord said that he would set Egyptian against Egyptian. The Lord said he was coming to bring division. The Lord also told us in the book of Sirach, the 12th chapter, to never trust our enemy. All right, because Esau is starting to show his horns now. The true Edomite that we've known from the foundation, the same one that said, race it in the day of our destruction. That's the same spirit that's coming out now. All right, he's no longer able to hide behind three-piece suits, hard bottom Stacey Adams, that slick back, that part to the side. He's no longer able to hide him. That same old Edomite is back, and he's back in full effect. And eventually, like it says in Revelation 12:12, he's going to come down with that great wrath, because he knows that he has but a short time. All right, and also while this is happening, also geopolitically, all right, you have these nations gearing up for war. So Esau, he's being pushed to the corner, all right, and like a true beast, any beast, all right, when it's pushed against the corner, it's going to try to claw its way out. All right, and we're in the time where Esau is showing his claws, he's showing his horns, and is getting ready to try to fight back against his kingdom falling, which is why it's important for us to continue to stay vigilant. All right, I want to get this in Ephesians 6 and not get caught up in his paradigms. I wanted to get this in Ephesians 6 and 10 because we're fighting against some principalities, man. All right, the battleground is changing. The battleground is shifting. The war is becoming more and more intense spiritually, mentally, and for us to hopefully all right, this is one thing that the Lord warned us about. This is Ephesians 6 and 10. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Now more so than ever is the time to be strong in Yahweh Bahashim Yahushai. Understanding that the Heavenly Father through his only begotten Son is our source of power. All right, the Lord is our source of power. And we're understanding that every single day we understand Yahweh Bahashim Yahushai is our source of power. And we're to lean on him. It says, put on the whole armor of the Heavenly Father that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. All right, right now we're up against the wiles of the devil. All right, his trickery, his deceit, his cunning arts. All right, Esau is getting very cunning out here with these different false flags, these different, paradigms that he has set out in front of these people. These exhibitions, because when you go into that word paradigm, one of the definitions is an exhibit, to exhibit. And what's happening right now is an exhibition. Esau is exhibiting different, thought patterns, different philosophies that he wants people to take on, and ultimately be overtaken by. Which is why the scriptures say, put on the whole armor of the Heavenly Father that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of the heavenly Father, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girded about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of the Heavenly Father. All right, this is our armament. And the Lord has given us this, and given us this in the time that he's given it to us, so that we have time to exercise ourselves in this armor, in the armor of faith, in the armor of righteousness, so that's not something that's foreign to us when the true battle ensues. Because the war for our souls, the war for our souls is getting ready to get a whole lot hotter. Esau is coming with this mark, which is going to be the trial of each and every one of our souls. One of the biggest trials. Right now we're being exercised in the manner of righteousness, in the manner of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, and understanding that he is our nourishment and that he is our provider and protector, man. Yahushai is our way out, and he's our way in to life, if you understand. But with that being said, that's all I had. Lord, when it's edifying unto your elect, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai Ba'ashem Rakakudash, and double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing this truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. Shalom. Stay up.